saw our director of that program at the front. Her name's Olga Veta, and she was at the registration table, so that might have been a familiar face. It is also brought to you by several sponsors. Tonight's event is sponsored by Community Health Development Incorporated, Amistad Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, Laurel Ridge Treatment Center, the UMH CFO Group, American Legion Post 479, Uvalde Healthcare and Rehab, and Walmart. So a huge thank you to all of those partners in making sure this event comes all together and happens and is brought to our community, because they are such a big part of that. Kind of to give you an overview of how this evening's going to work, we will have our keynote speaker here in just a few minutes. I'll introduce him. And then following our keynote speaker, we will have some breakout sessions. We probably will be done with this keynote speaker about 6 o'clock. We're going to take about a 15-minute intermission where you can continue visiting vendors that maybe you haven't had a chance to see yet. During that time, the rooms will be divided into breakout session rooms. So there will be 3 breakout sessions along this hallway, and then 1 along the back hallway to the left. And there will be signage to direct you to each of those sessions. So you will have the option to attend any of those sessions that you would like. One will be a youth question and answer section with Dr. Maricela Gonzalez. That will be in the last room on the right-hand side. Then we will have a session on addiction and opioid use here in this first room with Dr. Samita Sosa. In the middle room, we will have a session on depression and anxiety with Dr. Zimmerman. And then down the hall on the left, we will have a session on domestic violence with Ms. Elda Garcia. So like I said, we'll take about a 15-minute break after the keynote speech. You can go browse the vendors, talk to them, get lots of great information from all of them, and then we'll pick back up at about 6:15 with those breakout sessions. So a couple of housekeeping items just to make sure you saw that there's food in the back. So if you hadn't had a chance to make your way to that table yet, feel free to get refreshments after the keynote speech. They're in the back on the left-hand side. And also, I kind of already mentioned, but we have a lot of different vendors in the foyer. So please visit them. They have lots of great resources covering a variety of topics relatable to tonight. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce you to tonight's keynote speaker, Dr. John Hoover, which now that I'm up here, I'm like questioning myself how to say it. We just had this conversation. It's like Uber, but with an H. So Dr. Hoover is the chairman for Mainstream Mental Health, a nonprofit organization that brings lasting and positive change to lives of individuals that suffer from mental health illnesses. A mental health professional for over 20 years, Dr. Hoover is a clinical forensic psychologist, and he is a practitioner with privileges at 2 long-term acute care hospitals in Austin. Dr. Hoover has appeared on over 300 top-tier radio shows, like NBC Radio, CBS, and Fox News Radio, and 30 national television programs, including ABC, NBC, and Spectrum News. Dr. Hoover is the go-to clinical psychologist for Law News and appears regularly on America Trends national television show. In addition, Dr. Hoover is the host of Mainstream Mental Health Radio, which is heard nationwide and features interviews with today's top mental health professionals. So please help me welcome Dr. John Hoover.
I'm going to take this out here. There we go. All right, so if you have a problem hearing me, let me know. I don't think you will. One of the first questions I always get is, first of all, why did you start a nonprofit to try and destigmatize mental health? I got asked to go and be a member of the medical staff at 2 different long-term acute care hospitals, and the doctors would write orders for me to go see the patients, and I would walk in there, and the first thing I would get is, I'm not crazy. What are you doing in here? Leave me alone. And every day, that was my experience. I'm not crazy, and sometimes with lots of expletives and things like that. And over time, I started going back to the dictation room with the other physicians, and I'd be dictating, and how's your day? And I'm like, oh, man. And I would start telling and complaining about all the patients. They don't know anything about mental health. And about 2 years ago, one of the doctors goes, you know, we've been listening to you for like 10 years now. Either do something about it or quit complaining. So I started my nonprofit, and I was told it was going to take me forever to get the nonprofit status, because, you know, the way the issue is with how the government processes that. I sent all the paperwork in, and I had my hard copy in 14 days. So my wife was like, see, I told you, you need to do this. So I kept doing it, and in December of 2016, I started doing my little radio show, and we did lots of practice runs, and it's crazy how the minute somebody hits record, everything changes. You can talk to people all day, but when somebody hits record, and I started with some really great people who were willing to talk with me, like the president of the APA and all these incredible researchers from Johns Hopkins and amazing hospitals. And I was so bad we didn't get to air them. So some of them we've gone back and invited, and we've done it again. And that's been lots of fun and exciting experiences for myself. But as I go back into my practice, I started looking at what was going on. And when I was just in my practice, or when I was a school psychologist, how I started, people had no problem coming in and seeing me. Well, of course not. They're choosing to come, and they know you're there. So when I talk to my peers in the state organizations, TPA, Texas Psychological Association, and we sit down and they're like, oh, well, I feel like I'm very accepted in the community and this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, wait till you get involved where somebody's coming to you because a judge orders them to come see you, and we'll find out. Well, they don't do that. I'm a forensic psychologist, so I get that all the time. They haven't been outside of their nice little pretty office and the beautiful flowers they have every day. People are afraid of mental health. They are afraid. What do I get in the hospitals, or when a judge orders somebody to come see me because they're going through court and they're stressing out, and the judge is afraid they're not going to stay together as a person through their court proceedings, so they order them to come see me. And the people are like, oh, this is all about brainwashing. You're going to have me committed to a mental hospital, aren't you? No, that's not what we want to do. We want you to function. We want you to have an amazing life. So I started incorporating that. And over the years, or over the past year and a half of doing my show, my first month, January 2017, I had 16 downloads on my radio show. By August, I had 20,000 a month. And now I'm over 50,000 a month. People are excited about this, and I'm talking to people because everybody has mental health issues. Everybody's experienced loss. Everybody has that uncle that makes Christmas dinner late because he's too drunk and you have to wait till he sobers up or till he gets home. We all experience that, and obviously you guys are here, you know that. But when I get out in the public speaking where people don't know anything about mental health, they're not associated with the medical environment, they don't realize things that, for example, men, they say, oh, they only have depression about half as much as women. The problem is, what's the acceptable emotion for men around the world? Anger. And what is depression? Anger turned in on yourself. So it gets in there so big and so powerful over their lives that it just projects on everything. So when you see a lot of angry men around, they're probably depressed. There's probably a little child inside of them that the world's not going the way they want it, and they're upset, and they don't know how to express that. So when they say it's only 1 to 2 ratio for men to women, I say no, it's probably 3 men to every 2 women, if you want to know the truth, because look how many angry men there are out there. And then I start talking with little kids, and you see all these little boys with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The interesting thing with kids, until the DSM-3, which took place, I think, in 1982, it was believed by professionals in our field that kids could not be depressed. I wonder what they were taking. You know, it was the 60s, maybe some LSD or something, I don't know. But it's like, kids can't be depressed. How many times have you seen that kid who didn't get the Christmas present they wanted? You know, and it's rough, but what do we know now? You have adult onset ADHD, which I call BS on that. Those are the exact same symptoms people have when they get depressed. So they were the 4.0 student all the way through medical school, and then one of my peers at one of the hospitals, oh man, I think I have adult onset. I didn't think it could happen. And I go, what do you mean? I can't concentrate, I can't sleep at night, I'm restless. I go, I think you have depression. Oh no, it's ADHD, because that's acceptable to have, right? Well, the medication is a Band-Aid. When he stopped taking the medication, it came right back. So he started listening to me, and I referred him to a psychologist, and he started doing therapy, and he comes back, okay, you're right. And he happens to be a pediatrician. So now what does he do? He gets these young kids in elementary school with ADHD, and the first thing he does is send them to someone like me to do a screener for depression. So his Ritalin and Adderall prescriptions have dropped dramatically, and he's getting them off to therapy. Surprise. All these kids, they always say, oh, there's about 30 to 40% of kids that are resistant to the ADHD medication. It's because they don't need ADHD medication. They need therapy or maybe some antidepressants. Preferably both. If you're on antidepressants, I want you to be seeing a therapist. It's amazing how, if you get therapy, you can start learning how to cope, and you can eventually come off those antidepressants. Not so much with antipsychotics. If you have a thought disorder, it's probably going to be there for a while. Men in our society are so afraid of being weak, so afraid of needing help. I see it with myself. When I started working, my practice started getting bigger. I didn't want anybody to know I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And then my billing started falling behind. And those of you who do billing in medical practices, you know how that is. That's your lifeblood if that doesn't happen. So I started talking to myself. You're not going to be able to make your electric bill if you don't get this stuff caught up. And I had to sit down and start working internally. I taught at Texas State University for 21 years. 2 of the staff members that are psychologists in my practice were my undergraduate students. So that was a natural resource for me. I started with the 2 hospitals I'm at, working with them. They allowed me to do a volunteer program. So now, while I was at the hospital and the university, I stopped the university after 21 years this past summer. We got a contractual agreement between the hospitals and my university, and my students were allowed to come volunteer, and the hospital had paperwork drawn up for the patients that they would sign saying, yes, they know this is now a teaching hospital and that they have access, and that there may be students in there and they can ask them to leave if they don't want them there and like that. And it was amazing. Students actually started seeing what therapy was about. And it got pretty powerful. I would walk around with an entourage of 8 to 10 students, and we had to, okay, that's too many. We have to stop limiting. Only 4 people max. And then some of the other professors, doctors were like, well, they can follow me around. It's medical rounds, but they can still meet and interact with the patients and stuff like that. So if we got more than 4, some of the doctors would take them around too. And it's amazing. Something like 8 out of 10 of the students who followed us around are either in graduate school or now licensed mental health care practitioners. So they found out that that was something that they could do and that it was a real job. It's not just people talking about it. Stigma. That scares people. And my students started learning that it wasn't such a bad thing. So what would happen is my volunteers at the hospital would start showing up in my office with students with them. Hey, doc, I want you to meet my friend here. And then they'd sit down, they'd pull the door shut. She's having issues. And we would find out what those issues are, and then I would walk her over to the counseling center and see after he got comfortable with me, and then take them over to that next step. And it was funny because I would see students like a freshman year, and their senior year they're bringing in somebody. Hey, I want you to talk to my friend. They're having a hard time. Once you have a gatekeeper, the world becomes a lot safer. Okay? So you guys in the community need to help people understand, and that's why I do my nonprofit and I go on these radio shows. I talk about different things in mental health. One of the things that kind of scares me right now is all these mass shootings. As a forensic psychologist, I go to court and I have to testify, and I have to do my testimony based on actual research data, not what I feel. Okay? When I'm in therapy, we can go with feelings all day long. But when I'm sitting there in front of a judge and a jury and a bunch of attorneys, half of whom don't like me because I'm not on their side, I have to stick with the numbers or I get butchered. And what do we know about all these mass shootings? A couple of things. Almost every one of them, all of the school mass shootings, the shooter had an absentee father. The other mass shootings, unless they're religiously motivated, they had absentee fathers as well. The other thing we know about all the mass shootings and school shootings, as bad as they are, it's less than 0.1% of all homicides in this country every year. The media makes a big deal about it because A, it's rare, B, it scares every one of us who knows anybody who's in a public school, right? And then they use us and that fear to get us to change huge public policy issues that aren't really based on data. They're based on your emotions. And that scares me. For the first time in our history, we have some motivated young children who are out marching in Washington, D.C., in Austin, Texas, in state capitals around this country, and they're asking for their rights to be taken away. For the first time in our history. We need to do something, but the data says, the data set that says what makes somebody vulnerable is weakness. And if you make a place a soft target, that's where the criminals are going to go. They don't follow the law, period. If they did, just making a law saying you don't kill anybody would solve the problem, and it's done. But instead, they're going to our congressman and saying, hey, and I know this isn't popular in a lot of places, but when I go in front of judges, I don't do popular, I do data or I lose my license because they file complaints against me. So I have to step away from that feeling as a forensic psychologist, and it scares a lot of people when I do that. I was on a radio show, a nationally syndicated radio show, something like 7 million listeners, and the guy starts going about, oh, and we got to do this and we got to do that. And I go, whoa, wait a minute. That's not what the data says. It's what we feel like we want to do. But when I work with my patients, even in my office, I just don't go purely by feelings. I accept feelings in my office and I deal with that. But when I start writing a treatment plan, that treatment plan is based on research documentation that shows this has the greatest chance of working for this person. I just don't flip a coin. Hey, that sounds good this week. But when I'm in front of politicians, and it's crazy because 2 years ago I was just a psychologist and now I get calls from famous people asking me my opinion, and if they don't like it, they don't talk to me anymore. But I go, do you want my real opinion or do you want the research data opinion? You want my personal opinion, that's one thing, totally different. But if you want me to start talking about things that will influence public policy and people's lives, I'm going to go back to my data. And you can be upset with me. But I got into this to help people. And the best way to help people, just like being a parent, you don't want your children to experience pain. But sometimes the best way for them to learn is you let them fail. And then you teach them how to learn from that failure. And it's really scary. I was a school psychologist in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. At that time, I think it was the third largest school district in the nation. They had an annual budget of $3.2 billion. Billion. And I answered to the school board, who was in charge of that $3.2 billion budget. And one day I get a phone call, actually 3 different phone calls from 3 different people on the school board. And they said, I have a friend whose son was 17 years old and he dropped out of school. And now he is drinking and drugging and running around with bad people. And his mother and dad called me and want me to do something. You work in our building. If we have him here this week, can you work with him? And I looked at my schedule, actually at the first one, but I didn't tell the first one. By the time the third one called me, I'm like, yes, I'm open on Friday. I've cleared my schedule. He can be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. This young man came in, and he was being a man. tough, macho, you know, yeah, I'm fine, man. They're just all effed up, and they're just making a big deal about nothing. I hate school. It's a waste of my time. You know, I'm making good money. He was actually bouncing at an adult club, adult gentlemen's club, and he was dating several of the strippers, and he was talking, being all bravado. I'm having, you know, oh, we bring 3 or 4 of the strippers home. We have this big orgy and all this, just all this manly kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting nowhere. So I pull out my Rorschach cards, and instead of doing it like the actual test, I started using it therapeutically. And I sat it down in front of him because I wasn't getting anything doing direct. So I had to do something. He didn't know what I was playing with. He didn't know how to interpret what's going on. So I started asking him about these cards, and I got to about card 8, and I put the rest of the cards down, and I looked at him in the eye, and I go, okay, so when were you raped? And he turned as white as that notebook paper right there. I thought he was going to pass out. He started crying. He goes, my mom doesn't know. Nobody knows. How do you know? The Rorschach, you know. So we spent the rest of the day in my office, and he told me the story. He was out clubbing down on South Beach. Somebody rohypnoled him, you know, gave him a drug, and he woke up being violated by several gay men. At that point, he goes, well, why would they rape a straight person? So I must be gay. But he goes, I'm not gay. I don't like men. I'm attracted to women. And so that went on this rampage of having all these major sexploitation events. I said, well, look, you have obviously PTSD. I can finish up, do a full assessment on you, and I can get you back into school. You only have about a year left of academics to do. He was like almost a perfect, it was like 3.96 GPA going before he dropped out. He was like, nobody can know. Nobody can know. Well, in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, it's a county-wide system. It's kind of nice sometimes, but it's also unwieldy. It's very large. But what they do is they have one of the community college campuses that actually has public school teachers in there teaching classes where adults who don't have a high school diploma can tell their bosses, yes, I need Monday morning off and Friday morning off because I'm taking college courses, and they get college transcript for their high school classes so that their bosses don't know they don't have their high school diploma, and they can actually get a real high school diploma. So I talked to him about that. He would be with students that he didn't know because they're primarily adults outside of school already. And I called the psychologist over there who I'd known for probably about 18 months, and I put him on speakerphone. And with the student, or the young man's permission, we went through the whole story. And he said, if anybody knows besides you and me, he'll disappear. The psychologist goes, give me an hour, I'll call you back. He called back in about 30 minutes. He goes, I talked to my principal, I said, we got a serious case, and he needed to trust me. He goes, he's known me for 15 years at this campus, and he said he would trust me on this, and he wasn't going to ask why we put this young man into special ed. He would just sign all the paperwork like you're supposed to. So we schedule our admission review and dismissal meeting, an ARD. It's bound by federal law, and one of the rules there say we have to explain exactly why this person needs special education. So we go in there, and the psychologist is sitting next to me, the principal's sitting next to me, and then there's 22 other people in this room. Teachers, other administrators, counselors, the kids' parents, all these people. He didn't want to know what had happened. So I start talking about procedure, and then I pull out the form that everybody signs that says yes, they agree that they qualify. And I basically just kind of skipped reading the report, and I signed it, then the psychologist next to me signed it, then the principal signed it, and everybody else, just like automatons, just signed it all the way around. And he got into school, and he graduated. This was in the fall. He graduated that next May. I went on vacation over summer. I came back, and there was a 7-minute phone message from this young man telling me that he had planned on killing himself the weekend after we met. But he met me because he promised his mom he would come down there. And it was the best thing he ever did to admit that he needed help. He called me because he wanted to let me know that he graduated and he got a full scholarship to Georgia Tech in art, something he'd never done, but it was an elective he took in that place, and he put all his emotion and heart into that. I kept that message on my phone machine for 4 years, because you all know this feeling. You're working hard trying to help people, and it's just not working. They're fighting you, the people you're trying to help. And you go back to your office and you just want to put your head through your wall, because what am I doing this for? And I could always pull my door shut, pull that up, put it on speakerphone, and the world was right. And I'm glad to tell you that there's a lot more stories just like that that I've had in all different areas of my world. And mental health is serious. We all have that experience. We all are affected by it, whether it's us, our cousin, our brother, our parents. When I go into a hospital room and these people start yelling at me, "No, I'm not crazy." I go, "Yeah, you're probably right. It's kind of normal to be upset. You're stuck in the hospital. It's a long-term acute care facility. Most people are there anywhere from, a week to three months. Imagine being stuck in a room for 3 days. I had a patient who was in the hospital for 30 months. Imagine. And as administrators and working in the hospital staff, you guys know that it happens. People are there for a long time. It's abnormal to not be upset and to be depressed. And I write orders that are crazy. My nurses think I'm nuts. They don't anymore. But I would write orders like, he has to go outside for 30 minutes today. So that means you got to hook all his IV stuff up and wheel him out there and sit him on the porch and let him be there. Families come in. What do we do? Well, he misses his dog. So bring it up there. We have a courtyard and you can bring him around back through there. And when you get here, tell a nurse and they'll get him out there in the courtyard. I'm like, what? We can do that? Yes. Yes, you can. It's not rocket science. I wouldn't have passed the math. Statistics is all I can do. That's it. It's crazy to think, and that's really crazy. Mental health isn't crazy. Mental health is being human, and we have to remember that. And when I get people on the phone who said, on my phone radios, whether it's the Huffington Post or Gordon Deal with NBC Radio, so all these shooters are mentally ill, right? Wrong. Mentally ill people actually have a significantly greater chance of being victims of violence than being perpetrators of violence. The problem is people don't understand why somebody like the Austin bomber would do what he does unless he's crazy, mentally ill. And that perpetuates our mental health stigma issue. But the fact is, there's probably 200,000 young Americans that are in that guy's exact same position. What made him decide the answer is to go kill people? That's what we want to find out. And the truth is, he actually fits the profile of a serial killer. He had above average intelligence. He had a hard time maintaining relationships. He had an absentee father. His dad was there, but his dad would come home from work and go hide in the bedroom, put on a DVD in the back room, and never would come out. His mother was domineering, took charge of this child's life, never let him have a choice. I went through these interviews over and over and over. They caught him. That Friday afternoon, my phone started blowing up because I'm public and you can find my phone number in Austin, Texas. His younger siblings and their friends were calling me, "How did you know what his life was like? How did you know what went on in my family? Did you talk to my mom? What did she tell you?" I'm like, "I didn't talk to your mom. I saw the behavior and I know what causes it." I had KRLD in Dallas, Texas, have me on Tuesday after they got that first bomb that didn't explode. And they're like, "So, why do we care about that?" And I go, "Well, that's the Rosetta Stone. That's where we can find out what this person's thinking. All the information they need to catch this person is inside that unexploded bomb." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I go, "We have amazing bomb experts in this country that can look at bombs from Afghanistan and Iraq and see how they soldered the wires together and can tell you which bomb maker actually made them." Okay? And they can tell you by design Are they just trying to kill somebody really fast, or they really just want to maim people? But the best thing we got out of that was it had all those serial numbers from the batteries and the pipes that he was using, and they knew exactly what Lowe's he bought the stuff from. And they went to Lowe's, got their video camera, they tracked it down, they saw the receipt number on his credit card, they knew where he lived. So I'm on KRLD, and I'm saying they're going to find him very quickly. And they go, weeks. And I go, no, hours. And they started laughing at me. No, and he's going to go peacefully, right? You know, oh, the liberal psychologist. I go, no, he's going to go out with a bang. He's a chicken. He's not a normal serial killer who goes and uses his hands or a knife. He has to plant a bomb and run away. He doesn't have enough belief in himself to be able to take it out. So he's not going to go to court. He's not going to go to prison. He's got an exit plan. Sure enough, 2 o'clock the next morning, he blew himself up. 7 o'clock in the morning, that radio station's calling me. We need you back on. We apologize. We're sorry. We need to make a public apology that we laughed at you. And they've had me on like 6 times since. It's crazy. It's only been a few. It's like, I don't have to make them happy. I mean, they can do what they want. Because what do? I go back to the data. Data's amazing, but data's also not foolproof. We hear all this data about all our people, about what's normal in America. We use college freshmen to see what's normal. That's messed up. Okay? First of all, if you just look at college graduates in this country, depending upon what state, it's anywhere from 24 to 27% of our population is all that has a college degree or better. That means 75% of the rest of this country have less than a college degree. Okay? And we're using college students to determine what is normal? That's a bad mistake. That's why we don't get a lot of things, like all the polling that we do all the time. Why is it so far off? Because they're not really polling the average. They look at that college population, and that's what they use to go and do their demographics for when they go and make the phone calls. And then how many of you still have a landline? You don't have to raise your hand. But none of my college students do. None of my grad students do. None of the psychologists in my office do. I have a landline because my kids memorize that landline for their phone number. So if they ever got in trouble, so we keep it. I know they're 13 and 15 now, and that they're both black belts. Actually, my son's a secondary black belt. And everybody's like, why do you do that? You've always talked your way out of fights. Why do you do that? I'm like, because I can't be there all the time. And I've been in a jail cell with a serial rapist. Spent hours alone with them, with child molesters, with very violent people. And I'm not doing my children right if I don't give them some way to defend themselves. Do they know why they're doing it? No. I don't tell them what I do. I mean, they know what I do now. But I don't tell them the kind of people I've worked with. I don't tell them the crime scenes I've been brought to by police detectives that give me nightmares, that make me worry about my kids and my wife. But they're going to martial arts, doggone it. Well, why? Because it's really cool when you're using swords. It's really cool when you're using nunchucks. I challenge every one of you to talk to people about mental health issues every day, and to do one other thing every day. Find something to smile and laugh about. This life is way too short. Medical professionals, we all know that. We all know how short life is. We see 30-year-olds that we think should live to be 90 and they're gone tomorrow. We see patients who should get up and walk away from their treatment and be fine and go on and continue living their life, and 3 days later they're not there anymore. Why? Everybody's different. Everybody's internal drives. It's amazing how much motivation and love and compassion. I can't tell you the number of people I've sent to hospice who come back 3 or 4 months later and they're fine. And that, I think, goes back to the pet thing. I mean, we put a guy on hospice that I've worked with several times in November, comes back in the hospital in February. Of course, he went into hospice at home, and the first thing I get is my phone starts blowing up. He's sending me selfies of him and his dog sitting on his chest. And now he walks into the hospital in February. Thanks. You guys saved me. But we sent you home to hospice. Yeah, but if you hadn't done all the treatment beforehand, me going home wouldn't have helped. But when I went home, I was at peace, and I was happy, and I had that unconditional love that my family, especially my animals, can give me that nobody else can do. And that's amazing. So when I give people the suggestion from their doctors, because not every doctor is good at bedside manner, they'll go, can you go talk to them about hospice care? The one I hate is, can you go talk to them about their terminal cancer? That's not necessarily fair, but knowing some of the oncologists I work with, I'll go do it. Because they'll give them the numbers and it scares them. The end of life shouldn't scare us. It's just part of being human. Going back to that mental health issue. And you know what? 99% of the patients are fine. It's the rest of the parents, grandparents, uncles, cousins, brothers, sons. They're freaking out. And they're like, can you get them out of my room? They're stressing me out. And they get mad at me, and that's fine. I even tell my patients, if you need an excuse, tell them it's all my fault. I'm the one who says they can't be here. Let them be mad at me. The hospital knows what I do, so I get all these bad reports. The psychologist won't let us go see the patient. Well, it's at the patient's request. And they don't want to hurt their brother's feelings. They don't want to hurt their children's feelings. How much time do I have now? 4, 5? 5 minutes. All right. You know, I thought I was going to just do all these jokes and stuff. With my nonprofit, I love comedy, I love humor. I use it in my therapy. I want to remind people, if you suggest somebody go see a therapist, remind them that the psychologist or therapist has to do an evaluation when they walk in the door, but the important evaluation is the one the patient's doing of the therapist. If you don't feel like you can go have a drink of coffee or a Coke, or if you drink alcohol, a beer with that person, they're probably not the therapist for you, because when it gets tough, it's real easy to, whatever. But if you have an attachment and you feel like they're almost your friend, you'll still go in there and you'll work through your problems. So I know it ticks off my insurance companies because they're like, they've gone through 3 different therapists on our plan. I go, you know, I told them to do what's right for them, which is what they're supposed to do anyway, right? So don't forget to do that. We do a comedy event every year in September for my nonprofit. We go to Capital City Comedy Club and we tell jokes, and I talk about mental health issues, and I find funny sides to them, mostly about my kids and my wife and mother-in-law, but only when she's not at the show. And but it's crazy, and I really enjoy that so much, and I'm going to New York to go talk to some people, and the craziest thing happened to me. I have to tell this, and I'll give it back to Carla, and I got a call last Thursday, because I'm going to be in New York in June, from the comic strip, where they do comic strip live, and they're like, we saw your video and we heard you're going to be in town. When are you going to be in town? And so they've got a slot for me to go do stand-up in New York City. So if I'm still alive, because I'm just kind of choking up, I can't believe, hey, I might actually do a show in New York City. That would be crazy. But thank you for listening. If anybody has any questions, Carla said I had a spot out there. If anybody wants to, you don't have to. I'm not leaving till tomorrow. If you have time, you want to maybe go do dinner or something like that afterwards as a group of us, we can go do that. If you have questions, you want to know specific things, I'm here for that. I mean, you guys are the connection to the rest of the world. I just kind of a loudspeaker. Thanks to the PA, I've got one. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.